Once you finish the first part of the Soundtrap number 2 assignment, and you check the grade book and you have a 100 for that assignment, that should mean that you have recorded all 4 drum tracks in real time, and you've used at least 3 different sounds for each drum track. So what I'm going to show you next is part 2 of this assignment. So I'm going to come back up to the first drum track that I made here, and I'm going to make sure to solo these 2 tracks and to click on the header or to make sure that one's selected. And then I'm going to click the circle here of the little drum, and then I'm going to click on piano roll. So from here, I'm going to zoom in, and my zoom controls are over here on the right. So I can still see all 4 bars, but it's now closer to filling up the screen. So first, I'm just going to listen to what I've made here. Now, if you listen to that, hopefully you notice that it just doesn't sound right. It doesn't sound like the drums and the bass are lined up with each other. And that's true, they're not. Which brings us to the second part of this assignment. So real-time entry is really useful, like we discussed before, in that you can enter a lot of information quickly. It's good when you're just trying to experiment with some sounds and patterns. But rhythmically, getting that accuracy and getting everything to synchronize is really, really difficult. So recording in real time is essentially like creating a rough draft of your drum track. In part 2 of the assignment, you're going to take your rough drafts and you're going to create a final draft that should sound a lot better than what you have recorded originally. So once I zoom in, if you notice, the piano roll is made up of all of these grid lines, columns and rows. Now these columns and rows correspond to the pattern's beatmaker grid that has the 16 boxes that you check to create rhythms in the pattern's beatmaker grid. There's 16 columns through each bar in Soundtrap. And if not, I can click on this gear over here and set this up where now I'm looking at 16 columns. And if you look closely, you should notice that a lot of these little dots and dashes that I've entered don't line up with the grid. So the first thing you're going to do after you record in real time is you're going to put your cursor over the region at the top in the track, and notice this edit button appears. So click on edit, and then if you scroll down, you should notice this funny word quantize. Now, quantize is a really handy tool that we can use in the DAW to fix these rhythmic inaccuracies that come with real-time recording. So I'm going to come down here and click on 1/8 under quantize. And when I do this, notice what happens to all these dots and dashes over here. Okay, here we go. 3, 2, 1, click. Do you see that? Let me go backwards. Here's what it was before. This is what it is after I quantize. So if you notice, what quantizing does is it takes all those little data points we entered in the piano grid and it lines everything up to the nearest grid line. So now if we go back and listen to this again, it should sound like it's more synchronized with the bass. Yeah, that already sounds a lot better. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm finished. So notice down here in the piano roll, over here on the side, you've got these 4 buttons. So I'm going to click on this arrow first, this pointer. Now, when I have the pointer selected, if I click on any of these dots and dashes, I can hear what sound that is making. Now, I can also click on these and move them left to right, which would change the rhythm, but you can also move these up and down to different sounds. Now, if you remember when we first started making drum beats, I told you if you're going to make a drum track, the first thing you do is put a kick on 1 and then put a snare on counts 2 and 4, or boxes 5 and 13. So after you quantize, if you go back and listen and it still sounds a little weird, the first thing I would do is check those points. So first of all, this C1 is going to be my kick. And I do have a kick here at the beginning of bar 1. And then if I click on bar 2 in my timeline, this playhead goes all the way down. So everything's lined up. I can actually click on the edge of these and make them longer or shorter. And there's another kick on 1. Bar 3, I've got a kick on 1. And bar 4, I have a kick on 1. So that's looking pretty good. Now, the snares that are on boxes beats 2 and 4 or 5 and 13. It's a little trickier to see, but here's my snare sound or my clap. And I actually have the snare right at the beginning on boxes 1 and 3. If you counted the columns, 1, 2, 3. So what I'm going to do with your pointer, if you click and drag, it makes a box. And anything that box touches will be selected. So I'm going to drag over both of these snare sounds. And then I'm just going to click and move it over here so that I have a snare on column 5 or beat 2. And then down here towards the end of the bar, I'm going to take this snare and move it so I have a snare on count 4, which would be column 13. Now if I go to bar 2, I'm kind of going to do the same thing here. So instead of having the snare on 1, I'm going to slide that over to column 5 or beat 2. And then I already have one on box 13, so I'll keep that. All right, this looks a little better. But I am going to move this over so it kind of matches what I have in the other bars. And same thing over here. All right, so now I'm going to listen. I tell you what, let's make this a little longer. So let's go back and listen to it now. Okay, I like that better. But I also noticed that there are some places in here where I have a kick on count 4 that I really think is kind of unnecessary. And I want to get rid of those. So another option I have is I could click on a note to highlight it and then just hit the delete key on my keyboard and it'll go away. Or if I have like several notes that I need to delete, if I come back over here to my 4 boxes, if I click on the trash can, that's going to now turn my cursor into a delete button. So all I have to do is click and it's going to delete whatever notes that I click on. I'm going to leave that one. So now I'm going to go back and listen again. Okay, I like that a little better. I think I am going to move this kick over to count 3. And I'll move this one over. And I'll just listen to it again. Cool. Now, the next thing I'm going to look at is this hi-hat and this little sprinkler kind of sound that I've got going on. Okay, so now I'm going to show you another strategy you can use. So with this pattern, let's say that I really like the first 2 bars of this, but I'm not so crazy about the second 2 bars. Well, I'm going to take my clicker, my pointer, make sure I'm set on pointer, and I'm going to click and drag, and I'm going to delete all of that. Now, I like these first 2 bars, so kind of what I want to do is just do that same pattern again. So now I'm going to take my pointer and I'm going to click and drag to select this. Now this is where the really cool part comes in. If you look down on your keyboard, you have an option key. That option key is in between the control and command keys. If I hold the option key down while I have all these notes selected, so I'm pressing the option key, Now I'm going to click on one of these little data points. I'm going to drag over here to the third bar and drop. And just like that, I've copied my pattern from bars 1 and 2 and pasted over here in bars 3 and 4. And that's what the Option key can do, which is really cool. You can select a group of notes to copy and paste, or if you want to do just a single note, you can hold the Option key, click on a single note, and then drag and drop, and it will copy and paste. So that Option key is super, super useful, particularly if you get like a bar or 2 bars you really like and you want to repeat it. So now I'm going to listen to it again. Cool. Now, if you think about what this sounded like when I started, I think most people would agree that this is much better than what I had before. But all these techniques I'm showing you in the piano roll will be considered step entry techniques because I'm using my mouse, I'm clicking, I'm dragging, I'm deleting, and that's the great thing about step entry is that you can edit things really quickly. Real-time entry, it's great because you can enter things very quickly and you can experiment very easily, but you get all that rhythmic imprecision. So the process is always, after you record in real time, the first thing you want to do is put your cursor over the region, edit, quantize. Usually I do 1/8. And then after you quantize, then you're going to come use these editing tools to move sounds around, delete sounds you don't want, and really come up with a final draft of your drum track. Now, once you do that to drum track 1, then you're going to move to drum track 2 and go through the same process. So again, I'm going to solo drum track 2 and bass track 2, and then I'm going to click on my drum here and go to the piano roll. And if you listen to this, so again, you can hear that it doesn't line up very well. But again, step 1 is to quantize this and then listen to it. Now, sometimes if you're not happy, if you quantize to 1/8 and you're not happy with that sound, then what I do is I come up here and I undo the quantize because I really wanted my hi-hats to go quicker than that. So when you quantize, 1/8 usually works pretty well, about 85-90% of the time. But if you get a result you don't like, then undo the quantize and then come back and quantize again, but this time use the 1/16 instead of 1/8. So here I go, click. Now you can see this is different than what I had before, and now I'm going to listen to this. Okay, so that created the ride cymbal closer to what I had in mind, even though it kind of threw off my kick and my snare. But from here, I'm going to use my editing tools, like I showed you in the previous track, to adjust this and get it sounding just the way I want it to. And you're going to do that with all 4 tracks. Now, the last thing I'll show you is that once you get sort of these final versions of your tracks done, the last thing you can do, if you want, is if you come back to your instrument window, that's going to show you your presets. So you can go in and experiment with different preset sounds, and you can make each drum track different. Like you can use a different preset drum set of drums for each of the drum tracks. So you're going to treat these like 4 separate tracks. In any case, that is going to how you do the second part of this assignment, and I will start entering the grades for Soundtrap Part 2 starting next week. But in the meantime, get to work on getting things finished, and I look forward to listening to what you come up with.